one of the places very close to where I grew up was a place called Nayet Point. It was a little old lighthouse right on the corner of Barrington Beach and the stretch of the bay that goes up towards East Providence and Providence. And it's on the east side of the bay. And Nayet Point was the place my dad used to take me to. We'd take our little boat and we'd drive down there. And there's a lot of rocks. And it was a big bell buoy. And Connecticut Lake was right behind us. It was over a little bit south of us and a little bit south and a little bit west of Nayet Point. But Nayet Point was covered in rocks. It was, you wouldn't see the rocks because they were underwater, but they were like ledges all over the place. But one of the things about it was a good spot because the ocean, the currents were very strong. So it was like a river. And if the tide was going out, there would be a lot of current flowing over those rocks. And a lot of bait fish would be swimming up against that current and up against the rocks. And my dad would pull in there and we would drift and he would cast. Well, in the very beginning, he would use his fly rod and we would catch stripers on his fly rod. But then as time went by, we started to use spinning rods a little bit more often. And so he liked this thing called an upperman jig, and it was a white bucktail with a red and white head. And it was a lima bean head. And I would sit on one end of the boat, I would stand on one end of the boat, and he'd stand on the other end. And he had a big spinning rod, and I had a little spinning rod. And he cast that upperman jig, and he would bounce it. Like it would be in the water. It wouldn't be on the bottom, but it would be mid-water, and he'd bounce it so it would pop, like it would go up about a foot, and then it would fall down, and go up about a foot, and fall like a hop. It'd be like a bunny hopping across a field. And then all of a sudden you get this whack. This fish would grab a hold of it and yank, and you catch a striper bass. But they weren't big or anything. They were little, like, well, 16 inches was, that was a good-sized fish at the time, you know, but they would be smaller than that. You'd have to let them go. In those days, 16 inches, anything less than 16 inches you let go. Anything bigger than that you kept. And we catch 2 or 3 bass, 5 bass sometimes, and bring them home. Not all of them, but a lot of times we would. And then my mother would cook them once in a while. So most of the times he wouldn't cook them, so we didn't bring them home a lot. But anyway, and I loved those times fishing like that with him. We'd spend, it seemed like timeless. It seemed timeless. But really it would be like probably from 5:30 till 7:30 or 5:30 to 8 o'clock, you know, in the early summer. It started to get dark, and then we'd be done, and then we'd go in and park the boat and go home. And where we lived, there was an estuary, and so we would park the boat, and when we walk home, when my father had his car, we'd drive home. But that little estuary, I used to fish that little estuary. I still fish that little estuary, even now. I go there in the early spring. And in the early spring, there's a gigantic clamworm hatch that comes out of there that no one knows about. Well, maybe they know about it now. And I've taken people there over the years, and some nights you can catch so many stripers in there, and some of the stripers are really large, like really, really large fish, like 20-pound fish, in this little tiny piece of water. And it's all very wadeable, and the fish line up, and the current comes out of that little tiny, it's called Drowns Cove, Drowns, Drowns Cove. And the water turns, and they start to come out, and the clamworms come out, and then the fish line up just like trout do, and they just feed on those worms as they come down. And you can catch fish after fish after fish after fish. And it's beautiful. It's like fishing with a it's not the business of fishing. It's the old-fashioned way of fishing, where you just pass on your information to people you care about, relatives or friends. And you fish together and you do things together, and you spend time together, and you have memories that you'll never forget. You know, really, I mean, really, memories. I'm thinking about people I've met over the years and how I've met them. You know, I met Ray Monroe in the fall when there was a bunch of false albacore along Newton Avenue in Narragansett, and I was down there watching the albacore run. So I decided I'd go up to get my rod. So I went up to get my fly rod, and when I was walking back up the path to get up to where my car was parked, there was this guy walking down with this big fly rod, and I looked at him, and he looked at me. I said, "You gonna fly fish?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Me too." He said, "Well, who are you?" And I told him who I was, and he told me who he was. And so I said, "I'll meet you down here." And then I went up, I got my rod, and I went back down. And it began a friendship with him that lasted for years and years. We fished together almost every day for several years. And we had a wonderful time. And it was only two of us at the time. There were not three, there were no more fly fishermen. There was him, and there was me. And we fished and fished and fished, and then a few more people. We met a few more people, and I just got lost in reverie. You know, thinking about what they call Papagino and Ron Monte Carlo and a whole bunch of people from Rody Fly Rodders that ended up being the Rody Fly Rodder, second generation Rody Fly Rodder thing. And all these people were wonderful people, and just the memories are just fantastic, and there's just so much more. There's endless number of stories, you know. Stories about Colts Park, that little bridge, that little river that runs underneath that bridge. My God Almighty, the nights I've spent